Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Anne Grady. Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter.
I'm so excited about having you on the show. I read most of your book, some of the PR stuff, and I would really like to talk. Before we dive into the book directly, I would like to for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself. What is your story? How did you become a book author?
Well, like you said, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a trainer. So I work with organizations to help them adapt faster, recover stronger, lead effectively. But my personal journey started with my son, Evan, who has some unique special needs, mental illness, autism, developmental delays. And so our life has been filled with psychiatric hospitals and treatment centers and self-contained classrooms. It's been a lot. And so through that journey, I have had numerous health challenges. I've had lots of traumatic experiences with my son. And for a long time, I studied resilience. How do you get back up after you've been knocked down? But what I learned is that that's surviving. And in midlife, we start to reevaluate, do I just want to survive or do I actually want to enjoy the life I have? Do I want to feel good and live well? So I started digging into the research behind adaptability and was excited to learn that it's a skill and you can build it. And we don't have to just kind of declare ourselves stuck in midlife. We can reinvent ourselves and live a life we're proud of.
Amazing. I have so many questions on my mind. So,
Please.
um, if I understand, there's this surviving with thriving, and a lot of us have previously, before we uh, got out of the midlife crisis, we were just trying to survive, and basically that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that is also one thing that led to the burnout and so many bad decisions because we were just trying to survive. We just have to persevere a couple of more weeks and
Yeah.
then the next opportunity. And we have to stay strong for another month or two and then things will improve. And everything was in a future.
Yeah.
Nothing was here and now. And as we talked before we started the recording, you have amazing video on your YouTube channel that helps us get in here and now. It's a kind of meditation or guided meditation, and I really like it. Can you relate a bit about here and now? And you also talk that here and now we are safe and most of our anxieties are are due to not feeling safe, not being in the moment. Can you relate this feeling safe, thriving with being in the moment? What's the catch? Yeah, and you said that adaptability can be learned. Can we? What's your opinion? Why we didn't learn that, and from whom should we learn that? That is also what I would like to know of you. I hope that that's a lot of topics to cover. Sorry, but I really like to pick your brain because you're so special, and you put it so nicely in your YouTube videos. You explain it in such a language that everyone can understand.
Well, thank you. All right, let me try to unpack all of these. So, first of all, your brain is designed for one purpose, and that is to keep you alive. Your brain doesn't care if you're happy or if you're in love or if you enjoy your job or if you have great friendships. Your brain's primary goal is to keep you alive. So, to do that, it is constantly scanning your environment for anything that it perceives could be a threat. But as we've evolved, your brain doesn't know the difference between like a tiger chasing after you or uncertainty. It doesn't know the difference between a real threat or a perceived threat. So your brain, when you read an email that is just makes you miserable or stop breathing, like you grip yourself, the same thing happens to you physically as if you're being chased by someone. And so the goal is to create safety for your brain so that we can use higher level thinking, problem solving, decision making, emotional regulation. When you're in a state of threat, whether it's real or not, you lose access to all of those things. Your immune system is depressed. You're more likely and susceptible for things like obesity and dementia and cancer and all of those things. So the goal is to create safety for your brain. Now, anxiety lives in the future. Our brain imagines what could happen. That's like worry, right? What could happen? Depression lives in the past when we dwell on things that were that we can't change. But your brain is happiest and safest when you're in the moment you're in, even if that moment isn't the one you wanted. So all of us get distracted. In fact, your listeners have probably thought about something other than my answers just since I started talking. And that is totally normal. We spend half our time mind traveling, being somewhere other than where we are. And so part of that leads to this feeling of stress and overwhelm. You said burnout, stems from all of this feeling of uncertainty, and it comes from just our brain being exhausted. So anytime you start to feel anxious or stressed or worried, your power lives in bringing yourself back to the moment that you're in. What's interesting about stress and anxiety is that they're physical symptoms and you can't think your way out of them. So a lot of people, when they feel stressed or anxious, they try to think their way out. Why do I feel this way? I
Mhm.
shouldn't feel this way. I have so many things to be grateful for. Yeah, all of those things may be true, but they're not going to help you out of the anxiety and the stress. So when you're swept up in those physical sensations of anxiety and stress, you bring yourself back into your body because that registers safety to your brain. Your brain knows you're where you are. So it could be as simple as feeling your butt on the chair you're sitting in, or feeling the air on your face, or tasting what's in your mouth, or anything you can hear. It's just bringing yourself back into the present moment. Now, worry is different. Worry is the cognitive component of anxiety. Worry is an intrusive thought. You can't control it. But worrying or dwelling on that thought is where you get to take back control. And so, one of the easiest techniques for that is just to catch yourself going, oh, I'm having the thought that I'm going to screw this up, or I'm having the thought that this isn't going to work out. And just that little phrase, I'm having the thought that, creates enough space so you're now no longer inside of the thought, you're observing it, and you can decide whether you want to engage it. Most of our thoughts are the mental equivalent of junk mail. You didn't request it, you don't have to open it. And just because you have the thought doesn't mean you need to give it a microphone, right? Most of our thoughts are negative and repetitive.
Okay, I have a question.
Please.
Thinking about the thought seems like metacognition, and I really like it, and it's important. But is everyone capable of uh, abstract thinking or metacognition? Is everyone able to do that? Because
No.
okay,
No,
that's
some people don't have internal dialogue. It's rare, but there are people who don't have mental chatter, and I am so jealous of those people because my brain is talking to me all the time. Yeah, metacognition is just thinking about the way we think, right? And if you want to change your thinking, which, by the way, your thoughts drive your biology. So if you're excited about something, your body reacts. If you're scared of something, your body reacts, but most of that's happening in your head, right? So not everybody has mental chatter. So for those that don't, they're more prone to stress and anxiety, less prone to worry, which
Mhm.
means their power lives in that physical sensation coming back into your body. I personally am a worrier, right? So there's a couple of techniques that I use. One is just catching myself, right? I'm having the thought that I'm going to mess up this interview. And then I can say to myself, okay, that's a normal thought. Anyone would feel that way. Do I want to keep going down that road? No. All right. So what do? I prepare, right? There's another technique, though, that's super helpful. And it is what I call a worry window. And it is to give your brain dedicated time every day to worry on purpose. Your brain's going to do it anyway. This is just training you to do it on your timetable. So it's like setting a timer for 10 minutes. Let yourself worry about anything and everything, write it all down. Now, it's important you don't do this right after you wake up or right before you go to sleep. Our brain has the least ability in that window to like calibrate and recognize the priority of things or put it into context. So it sets our entire chemical system off balance. But give yourself 10 minutes, write everything down, let yourself worry about it. When the timer goes off, if you can take action on any of those things, awesome, great. If not, you visit it during your worry window tomorrow, and you'll have worries pop up throughout the day. That's normal. Jot them down. It's tomorrow's problem. You can worry about it during your worry window tomorrow. And so what you're doing is you're giving your brain permission, like, okay, yeah, you get to overthink, you get to worry about things. Don't worry, you'll have your time. But right now, I'm in charge. So we tend to think like, well, that's just what my brain does, but we can train our brain. And that's what adaptability really is about. It's the skill of training your brain to recognize how you're showing up and being deliberate about how you want to show up next. The values pillar. So I broke down the pillars into the word evolve, and the first V is values. And so this one in midlife, I have found to be incredibly empowering. I've been achievement oriented my whole life, chasing titles and accolades and awards and applause and all the things. But you get to midlife and you've spent all this time accumulating stuff. And then you go, is this what I wanted? Is this where I want to be? Is this really it? And so you start thinking about, who do I really want to be? And that's where this values pillar comes in. We're constantly faced with decisions and problems and challenges. Instead of asking, what should I do? Or how do I handle this? Or who should I ask? I've got two questions that change the way I make every decision. And this stems from the hardest decision I ever had to make. So when my son was 15, he was no longer safe at home. We were no longer safe. Our daughter wasn't. And we had to make this horrible decision. Do we keep him at home, or where he wasn't getting better, or do we spend our life savings and find a program that could really suit his needs? The closest one was 2,000 miles away in Idaho. I live in Texas. And we were tormented by this decision. Like, we made a list of pros and cons. We vacillated every day. It was like a huge risk. There was no guarantee that this program would help him. And so I learned in that moment that there's a better framework to use to make decisions and solve problems. And this has changed my life. Instead of asking, what do I do? Is this the right decision? Ask yourself, what is most important right now? Like, what value is most important that you want to guide this decision? Is it family, health, faith, courage, dependability? Like, you can brainstorm a list of values. What is the one value in this situation that is most important? And the second question is, which choice reflects that? So in our situation, I asked the question, what is most important? It was family, not just Evan, but our marriage, our daughter, our health. I had already gotten sick. I was diagnosed with an avocado-sized tumor in my face that resulted in facial paralysis, scratched cornea, a whole bunch of health issues, and my husband was having issues. And so we decided family was most important. And then the question is, okay, which choice reflects that? If somebody values family, what would that person do in this situation? What would the kind of person I want to be do in this situation? In the end, we knew that the right decision for our family, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much it cost, was to get Evan the help he really needed. Now, I didn't know it in the moment, but hindsight, looking back at that, Evan turned 23 on Thursday last week. And so in hindsight, looking back on that, I know it was 100% the right decision. But at the time, I had no idea. And so your values serve as a filter. What's most important to you in your life right now? And are your choices reflecting it? Do I take the promotion? Well, if your value is balance, maybe not. Do I speak up in the meeting? If your value is courage, then yes. So it's really about shifting from how do I act, to who do I want to be, and what would that kind of person do in this situation?
Okay, I just want to have a Jungian intervention. Would you say that these two questions shift our decision making from conscious to the unconscious mind?
I think that's a great way to look at it. So our unconscious and our subconscious work constantly in the background. And so it's hard because people say, well, what does your gut tell you? What does your brain tell you? It's hard to know because there's so much mental chatter, there's so much confusion. Like our mind is this chaotic ball sitting on top of our shoulders, and we're trying to make sense of all of it. And so those two questions simplify everything because they put you back in control, they give you agency. Life is hard sometimes because we don't control a whole lot, but you do
Mhm.
control your choices. You do control what's most important to you. And it may not end up being the right choice. Having clear values doesn't make decisions and problems easy, but it makes them more clear. Like,
Mhm.
how does the person I want to be react in this situation? I had an argument with my husband the other day, and I was convinced I was right. Like, and like I can look at it back at it now and go, okay, yeah, I was right. But that when I paused and asked, okay, what's most important here? It was my marriage and my relationship. All right, well, which choice reflects it? I can keep arguing that I'm right, or I can agree to disagree and move on and have a good relationship. So I think you can ask that in any situation when you're upset. What's most important right now? Okay, if that's the case, what choice do I make because of it? It just simplifies everything and gives you a filter.
Okay. From personal life, I would like to take you more into the business space. You're also helping companies get their
Yes.
values straight. Um, and I would like to get your opinion on my theory that every business is basically just a lot of people, and values in let's say 5 years, they are the lowest common denominator of everybody's involved values. Would you agree with that? And how do you go into helping business get their let's say vision clear,
Yeah.
and how should they um, introduce value? Because we now know that values, a piece of paper or something written on their website, does not make any change. We need to live these
True.
values, and we need to um, act accordingly every day. And as you said, in private life, sometimes we need to, because we value our customers, we need to make something that is not beneficial for the company or not the best for the baseline, but can help company in the long run, and can also show our, let's say, co-workers that we are humans and that we need to um, like eat the loss and do the right
Yeah.
thing. That this is more important than to come out on top and winning for, let's say, for the money's sake. It's more important that we preserve our values. Could you discuss a bit more about that? Because I know that you're an expert in this field.
So I'm so glad you asked. I work with teams at like Lockheed Martin and Google and
Mhm.
Microsoft and Johnson and Johnson and all kinds of companies. And you're right, values are typically just this poster you hang in an office somewhere with an eagle soaring that says, leadership. But the truth is that teams with shared values perform better. And when it's uncertain, when there's change and disruption, it's not rules and policies that keep people grounded. It's the values they share. Because when everyone has a clear playbook, everybody knows what's expected. So here's how you do this. If you're with a team, you decide, have everybody write down what are their top three values, like the things that they think would be most important to guide how the team operates. It might be things like respect or integrity or trustworthiness or any number of values, right? So you give your team a list of values. You can go to AI and say, give me 100 values, right? Have your team each identify their top three. What are the top three most important things that you want to guide how we behave and how we treat each other and make decisions about the business? That's the first step. The problem is saying you value integrity or respect sounds noble, but what does that actually look like in daily behavior? This is the piece most of us miss. We say we value these things, but we don't define it behaviorally. So, for example, if I say I value, so first, let me back up a step. So, everybody writes down their top three values, put it on a flip chart or a whiteboard, get everybody's up there, and then have everybody vote on their top three from the ones that are listed on the board or a sheet of paper. And whichever get the most votes, those become the values that you use to guide your behavior. Now, once you've got those, you define them. So integrity might mean I speak up, even, I speak up even if it's uncomfortable, or I admit when I'm wrong and I do what I can to make it right, or I'm honest, or, I can be counted on to do what I say I will do. It's important that the team defines that behaviorally so you can observe those behaviors. Because the litmus test is if I watched your team interact with each other, would I be able to know what you value based on your actions, not your words? So there are times when values will clash. For example, I might value speed and efficiency, and you might value quality. And so if we have a new product coming to market, or we've got, a software update, and one of us is going, we got to get it done now, and the other is, we got to get it done perfectly, those values are clashing. It's a great time to have a conversation around what is good enough and what is fast enough. Because you might have to agree that this week we focus on speed and next week we revisit it and tighten it up and focus on accuracy. At least it's a conversation, because without it, everybody's operating off their own assumptions and priorities, and it's easy to resent other people and get frustrated by other people. But in reality, they're living their values, right? So it's a conversation. But you talk about these in one-on-ones, in meetings, like at the meeting, if you say our value is integrity, all right, team, let's talk about how we practice that week. And to your point and your example of, we have a customer issue that's going to cost the company money, right? Well, if our value is integrity, it's an easy choice, because the right thing to do is to value the customer. If our value is profitability, then that might lead to a different decision. Now, I tend to think overall you're more profitable if you do what's right for the customer in the long run, but that's a decision the team has to make, right? So it's what 3 to 5 values do you want to guide the way the team talks to each other? And this is not just on good days when everybody's rested and happy and doing great. This is when stuff hits the fan and you're exhausted and you're working long days, right? When everybody agrees on them, it takes the guesswork out of how you treat each other. You go from, assumed expectations to articulated ones, and it makes all the difference for how the team operates.
Amazing. I really like your insights. Before we wrap up, I would like two more things. What's your number one advice for person listening our podcast? Where should they start, let's say, improving? What should be the one topic they should address first?
So the biggest thing I would say in our middle years, in our midlife, is we wear a lot of labels.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Anne. I'm not athletic. Hi, I'm not a math person. Or I'm a strategic thinker, or I'm a morning person. We wear all these labels, right? But we never stop to ask, who gave me this label? When did I decide to put this on? I'll give you an example. In the fourth grade, I was asked to play a game of dodgeball. And I don't know if you know what dodgeball is, but you peg people you hit people with these big red balls. And I got pegged in the face. And my coach was laughing at me and said, "Well, Anne, I guess you're just not very athletic." And I put that label on and I wore it like I turned 51 last week. I have never joined a sports team since that day, because I just put on this label that I'm not athletic. And then we live it like it's true. So in the middle of your life, you've collected all of these labels that you've put on yourself, that other people have put on you, and it becomes comfortable, but only until it becomes a cage. And then it limits us. And then we tell ourselves what we're capable of based on labels we put on in our childhood. So my biggest piece of advice is, pick a label that you're wearing that's no longer serving you, and behave like the person you want to be instead. So if you're not a morning person and you want to be a morning person, stop hitting snooze. Wake up the first time the alarm goes off. It's not rocket science. And you can say, but I'm not a morning person. There's no such thing. There are people who tend to do better early in the day and people who tend to prefer late at night. but there's not a person, right? There's not a math person. There's people who it's easier for, sure. But the idea is don't settle into a life defined by labels that you either didn't choose or that no longer fit.
Amazing. And just before we finish, where can our listeners and our viewers get in touch with you?
So you can go to evolvability.com and there's a free index that you can take to find out how adaptable you are right now. You can also learn more about my work and where to get books. And a portion of all my book proceeds go to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So it's just evolvability.com.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for all the insights.
Thank you so much for having me, Peter. It's been a pleasure talking with you.